Are you struggling to find people who are reliable, disciplined, good at working with their hands, and also a great team player? If so, I think you'll love today's episode, where I'm going to introduce you to Robyn Grable, the CEO and founder of Talents Ascend. She has an amazing tool to help employers bring more veterans into your roles because it helps put their military experience into terms that fit civilian jobs. Robyn Grable, welcome to How I Turned the Corner.
Thank you so much, Kendra. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit more about this tool and why you even brought this into the market.
Yeah, great question. So I'm a Navy veteran. I served for 9 years in the Navy a long time ago. But when I did get out of the Navy, I was told, we have no idea how to translate your skills. And I worked in computers, so it didn't seem like it should have been that difficult to know what I could do in the civilian world. And basically, I was told, you're a female, you can get a job as an administrative assistant or some administrative role with your eyes closed. So that started my journey of saying, but if I have more skills, shouldn't I be able to fit other roles within the civilian world? Fast forward many years, I worked my way back up through HR and different business consulting roles. And then I met an Army veteran's wife, and she commented her husband had been out for 6 months, could not get an interview, and he was struggling. And it really hit me like, wait a minute. I hear all these employers saying they can't find good people, yet here we have these veterans who have great skills, but can't get them translated or can't get into great careers. And really the disconnect was the translation of trying to understand what someone did in the military. And we have a lot of different roles we play in the military with a lot of different skills, but understanding how that translates to the civilian world and not just saying, oh, you were infantry, so you can be security in the civilian world, but understanding as part of infantry, a lot of other competencies were gained from that occupation: equipment maintenance, operational planning, logistics, human resources. So really it was started there. And then I said, I have to do something about this. So we built this very simple, very effective tool to translate military occupations and civilian occupations into a skills profile, really just boiling it down to the simplicity of what skills did they gain from their military experience? What skills do you need in your organization? Match the two together, have a conversation, really facilitating those conversations.
I love that so much. And it's interesting because the work we do, I oftentimes encourage employers to think about their talent pool in just a different way. Because if the traditional recruiting model is essentially targeting people who are on a active or semi-active or passive job hunt. Boring, like it's the same candidates, it's the same people. When you think differently about the work, though, and you even think about, veterans or felons or people who are trying to get back on their feet, stay-at-home parents, all these other roles where people who are maybe not actively being considered for roles, that expands your talent pool tremendously.
Tremendously. Military spouses are another great example that people are overlooking them because they're afraid they're going to relocate in 2 years. Now I've invested in you and I can't have you work remote. Fortunately, the pandemic changed a lot of that, which we're so happy for. But military spouses have so many skills. But if you look at a traditional resume, you're going to see gaps in their work history because they haven't been able to get a job when they've worked in overseas or just even going to places like Idaho, who knows, but because they're being overlooked for those roles, they can't gain that experience. But employers are missing out on so much talent. I learned a couple of days ago that the people that do have criminal records, a lot of them aren't even included in our unemployment rate. So we're not even considering them. And they need jobs too. They need to support themselves. They need to be able to get back into the community because we all benefit from that when we're helping these underserved talent pools get great careers.
For sure. I did not know that about the unemployment rate. That's terrible. It's like we put these folks through this, just both in the military as well as in the criminal system. It's like, well, what if we're going to bring them back into civilian life or normal life? don't we want them working and
Right.
contributing and feeling like they have meaning and value that they're delivering? We don't want them idle and alone. I mean, that's like the worst thing we can do for these folks. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
It contributes to everything from, the homelessness factor we've got for both veterans and criminal records, to being, underemployed. That's a big issue, which puts financial strains on their family, which then turns them into, being substance abuse. There's so many domino effects of not having the opportunity for great employment. And they have the skills. That's the sad part about it, that they have the skills. It's just people have gotten used to using filters of industry experience. And I always ask, what skills does someone have if they've got 5 years of industry experience? What skills would you expect them to have? Look for someone with those skills then. Because if you ask if I've got 5 years of industry experience when I'm just fresh out of the military, I'm going to say no. I'm not even going to apply for your position. So you're missing out on that talent. The other thing about jobs is that the companies have looked at them from a task-based perspective versus a skills-based perspective. So job descriptions have been written on tasks that need to be done, not the skills required of those tasks. So when you think about, I always use the analogy, if you ask me if I've absolutely chopped down a tree before, I'm going to say no, and I'm not going to apply for your job. But if you ask me if I know how to do mathematical calculations, if I've used equipment that requires me to chop down a tree, the conversation is totally different. And you open up a wide world of candidates that have the skills that your business needs.
Well, and I think too, what's often overlooked, and this is all across the board in all kinds of recruiting, is also realizing too that you want people with skills, but ideally you want them to have it as a strength. And how I see a strength is a combination of your personality plus the skill. And I think with veterans, especially, like you don't go into military service and do this work unless you are wired for it and you have the personality for it. So not only are you getting the skills, but you're getting people who have this hard wiring for being really good at being disciplined, like I said at the beginning, who are, good at working in teams and working in groups. They're reliable. Again, really good at working with their hands, working in complex environments. And that's not a skill. You can't teach that. That's personality.
Yeah. And the cultural diversity that comes from the military. I mean, the military is one of the most diverse organizations. And when a person in the military looks to their right or left, they don't see ethnicity, age, gender. They see the person who is their teammate and has their back. And they bring that to the civilian world. When they come as part of a team in the civilian business world, they're not looking at their teammates, whether their age, their gender, their ethnicity. They're looking at them like, how can I help you and I succeed? How can you help me succeed? And that's something, again, you can't really teach somebody. They have to have that. But that's cultural diversity that every business needs.
Yeah, that's a great point too. So let's talk about, though, I think some of the things that make people pause and want to feel comfortable hiring military and or let's especially focus on, past criminals. There's a lot of preconceived ideas and judgment that comes from that. Can you kind of help debunk some of those myths with us?
A lot of, for military, a lot of it is PTS and some of the disabilities of veterans. What I always tell employers is that every veteran coming out of the service with those disabilities, they are getting help. They are getting counseling. They are getting assistance with those situations that they're in. A lot of times, if you've got civilians that have been through trauma, because that's just what PTS is, any traumatic situation can cause it. It doesn't just happen to military. But if you've got somebody as a civilian who's been through something traumatic and they're not getting help, that person's a lot more risk for your business than somebody in the military. The other thing about military, the preconceptions about them is, again, their skills don't translate. If you were in the infantry for 30 years, all you can do is security. That's what we've put out there into the world instead of really looking at all the skills that go into being in the military. When you look at a traditional resume and you see somebody that's been in the military for just 4 years, but they've led a platoon of 40 people and they've run a project of $34 million, you can look at that and say, wow, you're way overqualified for the job that you've applied for, rather than saying, how can I utilize your great skills in my company? Maybe not the job that you applied for, but how do I get them in? So just getting away from misperceptions and just looking at the skills, looking at the person. And that's the same thing for people with disabilities, people with criminal records. We are all human beings. Look at the person and what they bring to the table. Rather than trying to look at a piece of paper to say what's wrong with you, look at that person and say, what's right with you? How do I get you? I've invited you in. Now, how can I get you dancing in my organization so that you can thrive and my business can grow? So it's really, my message would be, just forget all of the misperceptions that you have about anybody. What they did in the past, if they've made mistakes, if they've paid the price, if they've been in the military, doesn't matter. What matters is, what skills do they have? What skills do you need? Have a conversation about those skills. Doesn't matter how I got them. Doesn't matter when I got them. Doesn't matter where I got them. Doesn't matter my gender. If I have the skills, let's talk about what value I bring to your organization.
Well, it's just the right thing to do.
It
as
is.
well. I think, and I mean, and I'll own that I don't have a veteran on my team. I don't. But I think this tool is one of those tools that I could use to help me think differently about my roles. I do see in the kind of wheel of diversity, just in general, like we think about diversity in a different way than a lot of other people do. We see it as a diversity of first, male and female. Second, age, different generations. Third, different backgrounds, class backgrounds, religious backgrounds, different backgrounds around your family status. Are you married? Are you divorced? Are you single? Are you married with kids, divorced with kids? Like whatever. All of that brings diversity, as well as then veteran status, disability status. Then we get into color of skin, and those are all pieces that come into the wheel of diversity. And I want to encourage our listeners to think of veterans and felons, the right felon in your organization. That is adding diversity to your team. And when you add diversity to your team, you're actually increasing your mind share in the world for whatever your product is. We really can't afford anymore to have like only delivering out to the world, because that's not a big enough population to buy your products anymore.
It isn't. And the pandemic also brought to light that employees are no longer willing to settle for companies that don't match their skills or their values. So really valuing them as a person and who they are and that diversity that they bring to the table, that, like you said, that mindset of that thought process and that perspective. Because if we're all the same and we continue to do the same thing over and over again, there's a definition for that. You're always going to get the same results. How does a business grow when you are always doing the exact same thing? So you need that diversity. You need people who can come in with a different perspective and a fresh set of eyes. Somebody who's had challenges in their past that can problem solve like nobody else. All the things that the military goes through, people with criminal records, all they've been through in their life. That's a strength that they bring to organizations. And it really shouldn't be overlooked any longer. Businesses can't afford to. There is not enough. And I love when I hear people say there's a talent shortage. The people are out there. You've got to look at how you find talent differently.
Yeah, it's a mindset challenge.
It is.
Not a talent challenge. Yep, I love that. Well, I think that's a perfect way for us to end. So for our listeners, there is a QR code here in the YouTube video you can use to find Robyn and find Talent Ascend. It's also talentascend.com. And then we'll put all of this in the show notes for those of you that are listening to the podcast. But if you're interested in bringing more veterans into your organization, which I think you should be interested, we all should be, this tool, I've seen it in action. It really is simple to use and really remarkable. So we will be bringing it into Turning the Corner for sure, for both our recruiting efforts we do, as well as just let's change the way our team, to add a little bit more diversity to the Turning the Corner team. I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time today, Robyn.
Thank you, Kendra. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk about this. It really does require a change, and we're happy to be on that journey.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah.